take Psalm 84 and mark that for just a moment. And let's turn back to the 27th Psalm, and we'll read in just a moment a verse there. But as you're turning to the Psalm 84 and in Psalm 27, I want you to think about a very simple word. It's called perspective. It's about perspective. If you remember, and I know we've talked about this in times past, if you were to take a quarter and put it up here about the front row, it's not going to block much view. But if I take that quarter and I put it right in front of my eye, then all of a sudden I don't see things, because it's about a vantage point. It's about depth. It's about distance. It's about you and I today. It's about what our perspective is. And I'm saying that because it's easy for us today to live a life and so many things to be brought front and foremost, and that's what we see. But I also want to tell you this today, folks. When Christ is front and center in our life, when Christ is the most important thing to us, we don't see anything else. You see today, based off perception or the depth of things, in Psalms chapter 27, I want to read you a verse if I can, skipping down to the 4th verse. Listen to what David wrote in Psalm 27 and verse 4. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after. He said, there's a desire, and he said, that's what I'm going to seek after. That I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. But there's a reason why, and here's the results of that. To behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in His temple. When David talks about the beauty of the Lord, that's a word in the Hebrew language. It means the delightfulness, the stunningness of God. I know sometimes I can look at a sunrise or a sunset, or the trees may change colors, or I get into a majestic mountain, or just an overwhelming sight sometimes, and sometimes it's just an amazing moment that just freezes and catches my attention. And I just stop. And I will say that I even stare. I want to ask you this morning, when's the last time you truly saw the goodness of God in your life? When we talk about depth and we talk about how far something is, and that David began to talk about, he said, he simply had a desire. That's what he's talking about in Psalms 27 and verse 4. That I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in His temple. So when you talk about perspective this morning, I really want to get into the Psalms chapter 84. So bear with me. Let's read these 12 verses if we can. And David, in this chapter, he's not going to ask for a throne. David, in this chapter we're going to read about, he's not going to ask for any kind of power or prestige or recognition. All that you're going to see in this 84th Psalm is he just simply wanted to be near God. This morning I want to ask you this: how many of us desire to be near God? When we want to be near God, and again, let's talk about depth. Let's talk about perspective again. If I take a quarter and put it right in front of my eye, that's what I see. Can you take something the size of my hand? If I put it in front of my eyes, that's what I see. If you remove it further back, it doesn't block as much, does it? And my point this morning and my heart's desire would be is that, folks, do we really desire a nearness to God? For you and I today, listen to what David's going to talk about: home, or a place that he really longed and he dwelled to be. Sometimes our greatest battle is not so much about right and wrong, but it's about better and the best. And what I mean by that is, folks, today, you will never be more content with anyone than you will ever be with Jesus Christ. He is the one. In other words, He's your greatest satisfaction. And I'm going to go ahead and get ahead of myself a little bit. But David's going to say that in just a moment. He said he's going to talk about being just a doorkeeper in the presence of the Lord than he would to be in the tents of all the things that this world has. He's talking about perspective, that his desire is simply a nearness to God. This morning, if you leave this place and you're not near God, then the question would be, why? What's standing between you and God? What's standing between your closeness to God? Now, sometimes if I'm trying to get somewhere, I can't because, something's out or something's wrong or something's amiss. But sometimes the path there is open. We just choose not to go. But listen to this 84th Psalm. David's going to talk about what's important to him, what his priorities are. Now this morning, if you're here and you've never been saved by the grace of God, I want to ask you a question. What is more important than being saved? What are your priorities? I agree, there's nothing. What are your priorities this morning? If you're here and you're saved, can I ask you a question? What are our priorities? What's important to us? When we think about these things and we talk about, the delightfulness of God, do we really think that there's something more majestic, that there's something more beautiful, that there's something that has more splendor than God? And the answer is, there is nothing, folks. There is nothing greater than God. So my question would be this: if there's nothing greater than God, why would we even turn anywhere else? I know why we do, because we have a fleshly nature about us, don't we? Oh, preacher, you shouldn't do that. You should stand up. You should preach about the goodness of God and how easy it is to follow Him. Folks, do not be deceived. This world is very attractive, is it not? A lot of lucrative things that are out there, things that are important, things that we seem or that we deem to be necessary in our life. But I want to tell you something, folks. Again, I have a very deep conviction. There's a lot of things that's important. You need to get food, you need to get clothing and raiment, but there's nothing more important than your soul. There's nothing more important than that. And in Psalms 84, we read about perspective of life and what's important to us. I don't want to wear you out. Let's read if we can. How amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts. Now, the very beginning, the psalmist is going to talk about, the sons of the Korah are going to talk about, he said, God, when we talk about your dwellings, what can even compare to it? This morning I have no problem if you coming up with the best things, the most joyous things in your life, and you just laying them out there. Tell me all the things that you've enjoyed in life. Tell me all the places you've ever been. Tell me all the things you've ever experienced. You tell me everything that you've ever done. And then I want to ask you to compare that to what God has done. We're going to see about some of these things in a minute, about what they are and what they do. For he said, how amiable are thy tabernacles, O Lord of hosts. My soul longeth. There's a yearning, there's a desire. As a matter of fact, you'll hear him even go just a little bit further than that. Said, yea, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. Now, I think it's important before I read through this chapter. Courts are like enclosures, like a building. It's an enclosure. Now, let me ask you this. What good is a building if there's not a door or access it? So in other words, if I was to go out here and build a structure with the top, 4 walls and a bottom, and there's no way in, what good is the structure if you cannot get inside of it, right? Now, can I ask you something today? How many of you believe that Jesus is accessible? Sometimes we treat God or we treat Christ like He is a building or He's a place that we desire to dwell, but there's no doors that are there. Can I tell you something? John chapter 10, and we're going to read this maybe in a little bit. Jesus said, I am the door. There is access to God through Jesus Christ. The works of Jesus Christ. Well, so when we talk about our perspective, what do we see? Some people look at a building and they don't see no doors. They don't see no access. So therefore they come up with this idea that whatever's on the inside is not meant for me to enjoy. Folks, God intended for every one of us to have a relationship with Christ. That's what His desires were. I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to keep distracting for a second. But he said, my soul longeth for the courts of the Lord. My heart and my flesh crieth out for the living God. Now he's talking about these physical traits. Yea, the sparrow hath found a house. Wait a minute. God, are you going to provide for the sparrows, but you're not for me? The swallow, he said, a nest for herself, where she may lay her young even thine altars, O Lord of hosts, my King and my God. So if you have a being, he said, all of them have a place they can go. Birds have nests. The swallows, he said, all of these things have nests. If we're going to find rest, and there is a place and a person that we can find rest in, where is this place? That's a pretty deep question. I think today the world needs to ask himself. God made us with a place that we're going to rest. All the animals, they bed up somewhere, or they find a place that they go to. By our human abilities, God made us with a need to go somewhere to someone. We already know this. It's Jesus Christ. But let's keep reading for just a minute. He said, blessed are they which dwell in thy house. They will still be praising thee. Selah. Blessed is the man whose strength is in thee, and whose heart are the ways of him, who passing through the valley of Baca made it a well. The rain also filleth the pools. Now, this valley of Baca is like a place of weeping. It's like a bush that drips. We would call it like sap, but it's where it's always continually crying. Here we are, we're living in a world where it just seems like we live heartache after heartache after heartache, or troubles after troubles after troubles, struggles after struggles after struggles. But let's keep reading. Talk about perspective of things and why we go through these things. For he said, they go from strength to strength. In other words, one wind to another. Every one of them in Zion appeareth before God. O Lord God of hosts, hear my prayer. Give ear, O God of Jacob. Selah. Behold, O God, our shield, and look upon the face of thine anointed. I really wanted to get down into this 10th verse. For the day in thy courts is better than 1,000. Listen to what this psalm is going to be about. That perspective of things, that the importance of things. There's nothing more important than being near God. Let's keep reading. For a day in thy courts is better than 1,000. You know what? There's a lot of people today that forget that all they want to do is just be near God. He said, all I want to do, let's read the rest of that verse. I had rather be a doorkeeper. That means I want to stand at the threshold of a place. I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. Today I want you to listen. I'm going to read these other verses. But listen to what he said. I had rather. Today, folks, it's not about what somebody else had rather do. The question to you is what is the most important thing to you? Now you may say, preacher, this person over here, the most important thing is that Christ be first and foremost in the center, or their perspective must be close to God. The next person may be, he's further away. Let me tell you something. God may not be important to one person, but he better be important to you. For some people, they may push God on the back burner, but others, he said, I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. For the Lord God is a sun and shield. The Lord will give grace and glory. No good thing will he withhold from them that walk uprightly. O Lord of hosts, blessed is the man that trusteth in thee. But look what he said. I had rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God. You know, today, I believe the temple was an important thing. But I believe what makes the temple so amazing is the presence of God. So let me word it a little bit different. You can take the temple and you can remove God. It's nothing more than a glorified place. What made the temple so amazing is the presence of God. You know what was so amazing about churches today that I just love? It's not about their location. It's not about their building. It's not about the size of the people that are there, how short the preacher is, how long the preacher is, about how smart, or maybe whatever we put in. The most important thing is, does God dwell there? I know that sounds very basic. I know that sounds very elementary. But let me tell you something, folks. There are people today with glorified buildings and buildings that they have, but there is no Spirit of God that dwells. The most important thing that we see that David talks about, or the psalmist talks about, I had rather, he said, be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. You know, for many today, they would probably rather be out and all these other things. And what the psalmist is talking about, he said, I just want to be near you. Notice what he said in that second verse. My soul longeth, even fainteth. That's what he said there in the 84th chapter in that second verse. He said fainteth. You know what it means to be fainteth? Read that again. He says, my soul longeth and even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. Remember the courts we already talked about with this enclosure. Fainteth just means to become, I don't want to say obsessed with something, but it just means solely focused on that. Can I tell you something today? When I say that the word fainteth just means the courts, it means today that I am consumed with being in your presence. Folks, I hope I can say this and not be taken maybe in the wrong way. Some people just want salvation casually. In other words, what I mean by that is, I'll be saved. Yeah, I kind of want to be saved, but I'll do it later on. Or, in other words, it's not important. Folks, when I got saved, I was consumed with seeking after Him. Now, I want to say that one more time. When I got saved, I was consumed about His courts and His presence. You remember when Jacob wrestled with the angel? You remember what he said? I will not let go. Matter of fact, his bones even become disjointed. And you know what? He said, I will not let go until you bless me. Folks, when you get saved is when you get sincere and you are consumed with a relationship and being in His presence more than anything else. I don't want to be judgmental, but I will say this. There is a great fear of many people today that want a relationship with Jesus, but they're not consumed with Him. You know what? You can call me a Jesus freak. You can tell me that we don't live life or we don't enjoy things. But I want to tell you something, folks. The psalmist here is teaching us. He teaches, he said, my soul longeth, even fainteth for the courts of the Lord. Today, what is it you desire? When you read about Mary and Martha, it talked about how that there was a desire that she had more than anything else, and that was to sit at His feet and listen to Him. Today, folks, I'm not here for you to confess anything. It's just a simple question. What do you want more than anything else? Jesus. You may say, more than anything else, preacher, I wish you would just get to the amen, let's sing our song, and let's go home. That's going to happen soon enough. It may happen in 8 more hours, but that's still going to happen soon enough when it comes to your soul and eternity lost. It's going to happen soon enough. I know for me, and you all may be different than I was, I just wanted them to hurry up, get church over with so I can tell my parents or whoever I'd been to church or that I went to church with them or whatever was happening that day, and I could say, okay, I'm going to the next place. But you know what? The night I got saved, I didn't care one thing about anybody else, and I don't mean that bad. I didn't care who was there. I didn't care what they were doing. I didn't care what was on their calendar. I didn't care what was on their agenda. I didn't care what they had to do. I didn't care what they were talking about. I didn't care what they were singing about. I didn't care what clothes they were wearing. I didn't care where the preacher had preached from. All I cared about was my soul was afraid of dying, and I needed Jesus. There was nothing else I cared about. What about you? Did you get to a point in your life that that's all you wanted more than anything else? People want casual relationship. They don't want conviction and condemnation of their sin. Let's just make a carnal understanding of this. But there's a trouble there, folks. Let me tell you something. When you're hurting, you're not worried about what color the curtains are you? You know how many people go into an emergency room and saying, I don't like this color decor. You don't go in the emergency room saying, I don't like the color of this decor. You go in there to get better, don't you? Folks, when you go seeking after Him, all these cosmetic things are irrelevant, aren't they? You know what? May the church never lose focus that the most important thing is that a soul gets saved. For listen to what we're seeing. He said, I had rather be a doorkeeper. Man, we could spend a lot of time on that. But you know, doorkeepers sometimes were looked down upon as far as a lower level. You know, you can go back and read with the sons of Korah and what their jobs were. And one of the things they had to do, they had to be doorkeepers. You know, the doorkeepers had lots of responsibilities. But again, the doorkeeper, they got to see everything. They got to be a part of everything. Every people had to come in and they would enter into that place. And remember what the psalmist is teaching us is that of all the places in life I'd rather be a lowly doorkeeper than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. We're going to talk about these tents of wickedness in a minute. But you know, those tents are just temporary things. You know what, folks? I don't mean this, I don't mean this in a judgmental way, but may we be careful not to be caught up in the temporary things of this life that we forget about the permanence of a relationship with Jesus Christ. Listen to what the psalmist said, where he said, I had rather be a doorkeeper. John chapter 10, we talked about this just a minute ago. John chapter 10, let me read to you in verse 9. Jesus said, I am the door. You know what the doorkeeper does? The doorkeeper stands where Christ stands. If you've ever been saved, you're going to be where Christ has been. Let's read what he said. I am the door. By me, if any man enter in, he shall be saved. Doorkeeper stands where Christ has been. You know what else a doorkeeper does? He guards what Christ would guard. That's what he's talking about here. In other words, whatever Christ would welcome in, that's what he welcomes in. You know what would be great in our life? Is that if our life mirrored the things of Christ, not what we wanted. Let's start with unsaved people. What does Christ want to do with unsaved people? Does he want to send you to hell? Can I dive into that just a little bit more? Will he, and does he want to? Let's talk about that. Will he? Let's go ahead and answer that real quick. Absolutely he will. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity, for I never knew you. But that is not his desires. His desires are that you might be saved and a child of God. That's his desire. Today the perspective is that you must see that he wants more than anything else is for you to have that relationship with him. What's important to Christ is important to you. And you know what? Is your soul the most important thing? We talked about some of this just very briefly in Sunday school about how that we have the affairs of life that we want to take care of and we want to tidy up and to do these things. But you see today, the most important thing that you can do before you leave this life is get saved by the grace of God. That's the most important thing. Now, can you get all this other stuff lined up, taken care of, or whatever it is that you want to do? That's fine. But I'm going to tell you the most important thing, and we've all been there and done it with families and friends and people very close to us, but the most important thing is to leave behind a testimony that heaven's going to be your home when you leave this life, is it not? Yes, it is. Listen to what when Jesus teaches us these things, listen to what the psalmist is telling you. He said, then to dwell in the tents of wickedness. Man, these tents. It's not that they don't have beauty to them. It's the facts that, what is the purpose of a tent? First of all, let's say this. We think that a tent all of a sudden is one, it's going to be faster to put up versus one that's to go build a structure. So let's just do something fast. Do you think our society is getting to hurry, 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 that we want things faster, faster, faster? We just want to pop it on up real quick. But you know, Jesus is the only one that can tear down and build back in an instant. But he talked about these tents. And tents are not meant to be a permanent dwelling. They're meant to be temporary. Boy, this morning I think we can talk about a lot of things. Do you want to have a discussion? Do you think that there are things surrounding us that God intended to be temporary? Ponder what I just said. Do you think there are things in our life that God designed to be temporary? Why do we treat them like they're permanent? I want you to think about that. If God made it to be temporary, why do we treat it like it is permanent? Let's just cut through all the chase this morning. Do you know what the only thing that you have about you that is eternal? Your soul. That's it. Your favorite keepsake that is on the dresser at your house, as much as you want to hold on to it, folks, you're not taking that off into eternity. All these favorite things that you may have accumulated and collected in life, as much as we cherish them and as much as we display those are fine and well. Don't leave that I'm saying I'm against those things. What I'm saying is those things are not the most important thing. The most important thing is, have you been born again? Born again, being saved by the grace of God. And the psalmist is reminding us that it is important today for us that we might dwell, versus dwelling in the tents of wickedness. All these tents that you and I have, they're temporary. They don't last. You know what I want to tell people that get caught up in the things of the world? Well, I want to do this, or I'm going to do this, or I've got to have this, and I've got to have that. I just want to say, how long are those going to last you? They're not going to last long. The new wears off. You just watch a kid get a hold of something they just really, really like, and once they finally get their hands on it, after a while, they're like, okay, I don't want this no more. How many of you ever got to a point, this is a poll question, how many of you got to a point that you don't want Jesus no more? I've never met anybody that said, I'm tired of Christ, I don't need Him no more. Oh, we get vehicles and we get little gadgets and we're like, man, I've got something better, or I've got something that I can get that's a little bit newer. I'm going to sound like because it has happened many years ago. But you know what I've not gotten tired of yet? I got tired of a night many years ago when I sat in a church service absolutely afraid of dying. And I remember seeking after Him, and God just gave me peace. Folks, I ain't got tired of that yet. I hadn't grown to a point that I just want to say, return to sender. I don't need this anymore. My perspective is, folks, when I got a hold of Jesus, He's all I ever needed to see. Could you imagine the blind that had never seen that Jesus spat the clay upon the ground and He put it on his eyes, and the first thing he saw was Jesus? You want to talk about a letdown? What do you think everything else looks like after Jesus is the first thing you've ever seen? I don't mean it bad to the people that I worship with now or the people then, but folks, none of you compared to Jesus. None of you do for me what He has done. I love you and He uses you, but I'm just being very plain with you. Jesus has done something for me nobody else has ever done. He gave me peace. He gave me peace. I don't have to worry about when I take my last breath and I'm done in this life. I'm at peace of knowing where I'm going to be. That today my perspective is that I had rather be a doorkeeper today and where God is than to dwell in these tents, as He talked about. He said, than to dwell in the tents of wickedness. There's all these things that we're facing in this life today that are nothing but sinfulness and wickedness, and they're all just temporary things. But boy, do we cling to them, do we hold on to them like they're everything. They're not, folks. I'll tell you my everything this morning. I love my family. I love my friends. I love my church. But my everything, my all in all, is Jesus Christ. He's it. He's the one that I need. I love my parents. I love my wife. But you know what I love about Him? He done something for me that nobody else can do. He gave me peace. They can hug my neck. They can pat me on the head. They can pick me up. But you know what? They can't give me peace in my soul like Jesus can. Remember, He talked about a dwelling, how that we can go and we can be with Him. Jesus said, I'm the door. We access it through Him. Doors are not meant to prevent people from coming. It's to create a barrier or a mean of access is what it is. And Jesus is saying, I am access to that, but you must come through me. Look what He's talking about. He said, I had rather. Listen to what the psalmist is saying. He said he's got a choice. This morning, I'm not going to ask you to tell me all the choices you've had. But you know what? I had a choice what tie, and let me tell you, I've got a whole lot of ties in my closet. I had a choice what tie I was going to wear. I had a choice what color socks I want to wear. Let me tell you something, folks. Preachers sure do collect a lot of ties and colored socks. But you know what? Those are choices that really didn't matter. I mean, my feet may hurt or one may look a little better. But let me tell you something. There's nothing any greater than realizing that, and I'm going to say choose, but choosing Jesus is the greatest thing you'll ever do, because you can do just that. You can either choose to follow after that conviction and that drawing, or you can push Him away. That's what you can choose to do. And today, God is not going to force you, but God is going to draw you to that place. And the psalmist is teaching us, he said, I had rather. He said, I had rather, he said, than to be right here in this threshold of this door, boy. Because what's going to happen in this threshold of this glorious place, that's where the kings are going to come in and out. And you mean somewhere along the way, you're going to experience a king? There's a lot of people that are experiencing kings, earthly kings. I've never met one, by the way. I've never been to a place where I've met a king. But I've met the King of Kings. I've met the one that is called King Jesus. And you know what? He came right to where I was. He met me right where I was. And you know what he did? He passed by one night, and I got to go and to dwell with him. I don't have the attributes and some of the talents many others have or many others have had. But I tell you one thing I can do. I can hold the door so that others might be able to have access to where he is also. You know, sometimes people stand in the door and they'll cross their arms and you can't go there. You know, I think we call that a security guard. We're going to screen who comes in. But you know, I get this image of someone that's trying to screen and push people out versus that person that's keeping the door. Hey, you, come on over here. Hey, you, I got something for you. In other words, they're encouraging people to come in. They're not there pushing out. They're there to tell them to come in. Sometimes churches, folks, I don't mean this in a judgmental way, sometimes we're pushing people out. But really and truly, we're supposed to be that salesman that walks by. You know how the one that talks to you and you just walk right by them like you didn't hear them? Hey, have you ever looked about trying to save 25% and you just keep on walking like you never heard them? They're trying to encourage you to take something they have to offer. When's the last time we encouraged people to come into the house of the Lord? Instead, we just kind of shoo them out. You know what? I thank God that many years ago, God brought me into a place that people they held the door. That's all they did. They held the door. They brought me to Jesus. And you know what? They didn't play Jesus. They didn't try to replace Jesus. They just allowed me to get to him. I wonder how many people today, there's a preacher or there's a committee or there's a board that you've got to answer to instead of going directly to Jesus. I'm going to hush in a minute, but you know what happened? When you go back into the tabernacle, there was this curtain that went in the holiest of holies. The dimensions of the curtain was so thick, you could take 2 ox, tie them, and they could not pull that curtain apart. That's how strong and big and mighty it was. And what that was, that curtain separated that the holiest of holies, where you get into the presence of God, that only the high priest could go in once a year and get forgiveness of the sins on behalf of the people. In other words, you had to depend on somebody to go in the presence of God on your behalf. When Jesus was crucified, the scriptures are very plain. It said, and the veil was rent. Now, the word rent just means it was absolutely shredded. Now, if it was just to fall down, you know what somebody could do? Let's get enough people. Let's get enough machinery. Let's just hoist this thing back up, and then we'll block the people out. But when Jesus shred that veil, it just means it could not ever be put back up again. Folks, when Jesus died on Calvary, he died, and there is nothing that anybody can do that can undo your access to God anymore. You don't need a high priest. You know, the priest to wear the white collar. And again, I'm not trying to be any kind of derogatory. But you know, that little square means you take your burdens and bring them to me. Folks, I want to tell you something. Take your burdens not to a man, but you take them to Jesus. You don't need anybody between you and God. Jesus is the only one. He has access. When he crucified, the veil was rent. It was shredded. That means no longer once a year could you go into the holiest of holies. No longer did you have to depend on somebody else. You have 24/7 access to Jesus. Folks, I'm going to tell you something. I know we've turned the calendar over to 2026, but you know what I can still say? You have 24-hour access to Jesus Christ. Oh, it's not just Sunday morning from 10 o'clock to about 12 or 1, however long you're here. Folks, you got access to him all the time. I can't tell you how many times my phone's rang in the late hours or the early hours or the midnight hours, and people talk about getting saved. Just a real quick question, just raise your hand. How many of you were saved on another day besides Sunday? Just Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? See? Lord don't just save on Sundays, does he? I love it when we sing glory, glory, glory. They stand up on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and Saturday. And we think that Lord's only limited to one day. Folks, he is not limited to one day and only a couple of hours. He can do it at all hours. The psalmist is talking about, he said, I had rather, of all the things, he said, I had rather be a doorkeeper. He said the most important thing of all for me is that he just wanted to be where God is. In Psalms 27, David said, one thing have I desired of the Lord. He said there's one thing that's important that I will seek after. What are you seeking after today? What's your perspective? What's the most important thing? It's not that there's not other things. What's the most important thing? That I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Psalms 23 kind of ends like that, don't it? That I may dwell in the house of the Lord forever. We're just transitioning from the presence of God in life to the presence of God in eternity. You know what I love about it? God's presence is in both. He's in both life and He's also in death. But if you don't have that, then you need to get that this morning. For the David said, one thing have I desired of the Lord, that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Because it's in this place, and I don't mean a building, but it's in Christ Jesus. He said, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in His temple. His delightfulness, His beauty and His splendor. I fully understand this morning. There's other places, and I know sometimes you cannot. There's other places you could be today. Probably things you got to do, don't you? But you know what? We also know this. We also know that the most important thing that we can ever do is to be able to say, Lord, I just want to admire your beauty. Sometimes that sunrise or sunset will just get my attention. I'm just mesmerized. I just want to stop. And I just want to stare because it's so majestic. Folks, when God comes into our life, do we really just get awestruck? Or do we really realize that we can access His presence? But it's all about perspective when we see Him and His beauty and where we are. It's not just about do we let Christ come into us or we're where we should be. It's about perspective. Do we push Him further away? Sometimes I think we're way off in the background. We got our binoculars and we're looking out the door. But we're not experiencing the same thing at a distance, are you? It's about being there. And my point is this. Folks, the beauty of heaven is not that we're going to stand and stare from a distance, but it's the fact that we're going to be there. I want you to know that I thank God for a testimony in a time in my life where He gave me peace to a troubled soul. And one of these days, you're going to hear, well, Scott's days on this earth are through. I just want you to know that I'm just not going to cease to exist. I'm going to go to be with Him. Right now, I just feel like I'm just a doorkeeper. I know I'm not very much. But you know what? One of these days, I'm going to quit my doorkeeping. I'm going to go right on inside. I'm just right there on the cusp. I'm right there on the edge. You know what? This morning, I'm going to say this. I don't want to keep rambling with you. You know what? Some of you may be right now ready to turn and go on the inside. Oh, preacher, I've got a long life to live. I think we all know this. Life is short. Life can change. But what happens when He says, oh, your time's over with. Depart from me, you workers of iniquity, for I never knew you. David said, I just simply want to seek after Him in His beauty. God bless you. That's what I had. Let's get a song if we could.